Did you know that it was an African who founded the city of Chicago in America? Welcome to the Sankofa Pan African series. Please support us by taking a few seconds to click on the subscribe button. Thank you. Today, we are celebrating the life of Jean Baptiste Point DuSable. Unfortunately, very little is known about DuSable's life. Some accounts speculate that he was born around 1745 in the village of Saint Mark on the island of Saint-Domingue. Now, Saint-Domingue is a country now known as Haiti. His ancestry on his mother's side was African. Some sources say she was a slave, while some others think she might have been a former slave. On his father's side, his father is believed to have been a French sailor, who then took DuSable to France, where he was educated. He was fluent in French and also acquired knowledge of French art and culture by living in France. In addition, he was able to speak English and Spanish. Now, as a young man, DuSable began his working life on his father's ships as a seaman. During one of their voyages to New Orleans, which was still a French colony, his ship suffered some mishap and DuSable got injured. While in New Orleans, he ran into some trouble with the Spanish, who were trying to overthrow the French from New Orleans. Because at that time, these European countries were forever fighting with each other over the acquisition of various parts of North America. So at this particular point in DuSable's history, the Spanish were trying to overtake New Orleans from the French. Now, and then he got into trouble with them, probably because he was a French-speaking person. And then for the same reason, of being a French speaker, he was protected by some French priests, probably because he spoke their language. After he recovered from his injuries, the injuries which he sustained at sea, he then headed towards the interior of the American continent, following the Mississippi River. He first settled briefly in Peoria, in an area which is now part of the state of Illinois, in the 1770s. And so he settled briefly in Peoria, where he integrated with the indigenous Potawatomi people and even married one of them. His wife was a Potawatomi, and her name was Kitihawa, although she later changed and acquired the name Catherine when she became baptized. Now, from the Potawatomi, he found his way towards the Great Lakes area and ended up in the present-day Chicago, area that we now know as Chicago. At the time, the area was uninhabited and uninhabitable because it was damp, barren, and extremely marshy with an acrid kind of smell. The area smelled foul, Now, some sources believe that this was why the indigenous people around the area called the area Chicago. Chicago has been translated by some to mean a place of bland smells, a place of bad smells, or land of the wild onions because of the way it smells. An anecdotal submission by Margaret Burroughs, however, suggests that because the marshland smelled so bad, it made people sneeze, and that Chicago sounds close enough to the sound of that a person makes when they sneeze, and that this might have been why the indigenous people who lived in the vicinity called it Chicago. What we do know is that over time, the name evolved into Chicago, the name that the city is now called. The poor nature of East Chicago made it uninhabitable and unattractive to Europeans who might have settled there. Now, however, Jean Baptiste DuSable saw potential and value in the land as soon as he saw it. On getting there, once again, he made friends with the indigenous people around the area, because, like I said, nobody lived in the marshland area. And these indigenous people that he befriended allowed him to establish the first permanent home in the marshland. Now, the area where he built his establishment is the site of the current Tribune Tower in downtown Chicago. This was no small achievement, and the cabin that DuSable built was a substantial structure. The home that he built on the north bank of the Chicago River had about 800 acres of land. The main building had 5 bedrooms and all the amenities that were available at the time. He also started trading by selling tools to the indigenous people who trapped animals, which he then bought from them to be processed. He also gradually developed a trading post, a smokehouse, a bakehouse, a dairy, a mill, a horse stable, and a barn. In addition to other outbuildings, so he developed the area into a collection of thriving businesses. So he continued to buy trapped animals and raw materials from the indigenous people who lived around him. And then he used these animals and the agricultural products to make things like flour, processed meat, and fur materials. Now, the location of DuSable's trading post allowed it to attract customers from places as far away as present-day Detroit and even Canada. With the trade that DuSable established, East Chicago grew into a key depot and a main trading route for the area. He was extremely successful, and his home is said to have been filled with fine furniture and paintings, indicating that the family had become prosperous. His trading post, which then became the major trade supply depot for all kinds of traders, woodsmen, trappers, was just continued to grow from year to year. So his foresight, and it speaks of his foresight, which allowed him to recognize the potential of the location as strategic, in spite of it being a smelly area. And that is what now allowed the city of Chicago to grow into a major depot and a key trading post, which over time grew into the city of Chicago that we know today. Now, with his business turning him into a wealthy man, he continued to expand by acquiring herds of livestock, poultry, and pigs. Now, let's pause for a moment. Can you imagine the impact that his successful business would have had on other people in the vicinity? This also marks him as a different kind of pioneer than most Europeans who settled in North America and other colonies. So unlike them, who would, when they got to a place, find ways to destroy and overwhelm the indigenous people, DuSable befriended them, and so that as his business prospered, they also prospered. Now, and he became so successful that the British considered him a big enough threat to detain him for 5 years during the Revolutionary War, because he was a French sympathizer, and he supported America's desire to free itself from British colonization. Incidentally, or rather significantly, DuSable's granddaughter, who was born in 1796, was the first child to be born in what today is the great city of Chicago. And unfortunately and almost mysteriously, on the 7th of May, 1800, for reasons which are still not clear today, DuSable sold his home and thriving business to a white guy. And I think he is reported to have sold it for about $1,200. Now, we don't know why, but we can only marvel at what would have made him, sell a thriving and successful business. He died on the 28th of August, 1818, in St. Charles, Missouri. And there's really no indication that he was as successful in Missouri, or that he died a successful businessman. Thanks for being a part of the Sankofa Pan-African series. Please don't forget that we can only continue this series with your support. We cannot continue if you don't support us. So please support us by subscribing and giving us a thumbs up, and also by sharing our videos with your friends and contacts. See you next time.